the Voice of Wrestling, right here on voiceofwrestling.net. Chris Cash, Nick Paglino, and it is time to discuss a ton of stuff going on. In fact, Nick, right before we came on the air, of course, you brought up All In, and we're going to talk about All In because everybody went all in. No pun, actually pun completely intended. They went all in on this show and this event, this entire weekend. Of course, our partner network, Fight TV, I was getting notifications all weekend long from everything that they had going on, all of these events. It was absolutely incredible, all the way down to the post-event speech that was given in the middle of the ring. We'll discuss that as well. I know you guys were covering it over at ProWrestling.com. And then, of course, we have a ton of stuff also going on this week, Nick, as far as WWE and the fact that, in my personal opinion, I feel like they kind of rush a lot of things, big time, in fact. And we're going to talk about, of course, what it is that they're rushing, from the fact that we do seem to have a legitimate faction, Nick, in Dolph Ziggler, Drew McEntire, and, of course, Braun Strowman. And then we also had Kevin Owens, after you and I spent 15 minutes last week talking about the possibilities of what was going to happen there, Nick. We found out that Kevin Owens is only going to be quit or gone for less than 7 days, I guess, technically. He was like, he quit. He basically just was on, he quit his days off. He quit the normal days off. Right. He was at work last week and he was at work this week. Right. So he did this completely backwards. He quit his days off. I'm not positive he understands what quitting is. You got to not be at work to quit last week, and you got to not be at work this week. Right. But I will say this. It was Labor Day. And that's true. I have to say to everyone, because, this is airing after Labor Day. First of all, I got to say, happy belated. Do you wish somebody a happy Labor Day? Yeah, I think so. You do? Because, I hear, it's like Merry Christmas, Happy Halloween. You say Happy Labor Day? Yeah. Up someone, hey, man, Happy Labor Day. Sure. You go into, like, a hospital room, a woman's, like, pushing a baby out. You're like, happy now. Happy right now. Happy right now. But, I mean, I guess Happy Labor Day would be the way to say it if you're going to say it. This is how you say it. Okay, so happy belated Labor Day. And I really want to thank people like Kevin Owens for truly defining Labor Day, because he quit the company, but he showed up and did his job on Raw this week. I want to thank the Ohio State Police Department for arresting, booking, processing, imprisoning, and then releasing. And giving them their car. And giving them a ride. Back to the stadium. Like, tossed the keys to Roman and said, here you go. Here you go. Take our car. You can have our car. Take the car we picked you up in. To get them back in time for the main event of Raw. And I want to thank the Shield for going back to work after they had been arrested and thrown in jail by their employers. They went back to that job. That is Labor Day. That is what Labor Day is all about. That is people who did real, actual labor yesterday, and they did it in the name of America. They did. And I want to thank those people for truly expressing and defining what Labor Day was. An interesting Raw I think, Nick, a really interesting Raw, and we are going to get to All In. That's going to probably be kind of our second main event, but there is something else that we have not mentioned yet that I've been asked about a couple of times, and people don't even ask me wrestling things anymore. And even I've been asked about this locally. A couple of guys know me, from wrestling here in my home city, and they've asked me about this. So, of course, we're going to start off talking a little bit about Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker here on the main event. It's the main event. Chris Cash, Nick Paglino here on the Voice of Wrestling. And, Nick, we've got to start off talking about Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker on Raw this week. We knew Shawn Michaels was going to be there. I don't know that it was announced The Undertaker would be. The crowd certainly didn't seem to know. I had no idea. I was excited to see him, obviously. I thought it really made for a great segment, but an interesting one, because there's a couple of ways we can take this, Nick. One, we can say that it really was kind of improv that they did in the middle of that ring to kind of add some a personal note. And obviously Shawn Michaels coming back, knowing that the one more match chance were going to take place. Maybe this was just something that was kind of thrown out there willy-nilly. They did not plan this. They did not mean to tease what really felt like a potential coming out of retirement for Shawn Michaels, and the idea that maybe they really just, it kind of went there, and they probably walked backstage, came up to one another, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean for that to happen, because now everybody's going to be talking about that. Obviously, the other side of that coin is the obvious, and the fact that they were kind of alluding to the possibility of maybe it's been discussed with Shawn Michaels. Maybe he's getting an itch and he wants to come back for one more match. So, Nick, let's start there, and let's start with the idea that let's start with the idea of whether you believe it's which one of those scenarios. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the fact that if Shawn Michaels comes back, I think a lot of fans will very rightfully so be let down if it's against The Undertaker, if there's only one more, if it's not like an extended short-term, long-term run, if it's not a few matches, if it's really just one. There's several other names that have been tossed around that I think most people, Nick, would probably prefer. And so, but before we get into those scenarios, let's just start with the idea of option A. They didn't really mean for it to go down that road in their promo. Or option B, they absolutely meant to do that. And do you think it's kind of gearing up for maybe a 2019 return, Mania, something like that, and a one-off match or some sort of extended run, obviously, for Shawn Michaels?
Well, I'm going to take option B. I think they definitely meant to go there, because these guys have been in the business long enough. They've done this long enough, especially a guy like an Undertaker who's not very long-winded when he cuts promos.
That's true.
And his promos are typically very scripted. It's not because he doesn't deliver them well and you can hear them being scripted. It's because of the nature of his character, right, with the rest in peace phrases and I'll bury you, and those are typically lines that are written for him. And when he came at Shawn Michaels and said, you mentioned retired, but is it that you're scared? That was good. I like that.
It was very good.
It matches my beard, the graveliness, But when he came at Shawn Michaels with that line, that definitely felt like somewhat of a dramatic punchline. That did not seem to me like he created that on the spot. So I think they meant to go down that road. And I also want to point out the fact that, there has been a sort of long fabled policy in WWE. And Dave Meltzer actually reported on this immediately after Raw, that you don't mention something, you don't hype something in WWE on television unless you know there is going to be a payoff for
Sure.
it. And I think these guys are obviously pros. They've been doing this for a really long time. They are veterans. They would know better than to sit there and tease something that they know maybe has absolutely no chance of happening. Now, as far as what is going to happen, could you see this match? I absolutely think you could see this match, and I think it makes the most sense, and here's why. Shawn Michaels has been doing a lot of teasing of one more match in the past, say, 6 months. He's been doing interviews where he has said, he's got that itch. Maybe he would like to get back in there and mix it up one more time. But just like with someone like a Goldberg, he talked about the rigors of training for a return at his age. And not only did he discuss, when you talk about a guy like a Goldberg, who are you going to match him up with? You're matching him up against the Undertakers, the Triple H's, the Batistas,
sure,
the Brock Lesnar's, the bigger ground and pound type guys. It's different for an HBK. You mentioned guys that we would maybe rather see a HBK face than a guy like the Undertaker. Who would that be?
Styles.
The AJ Styles, the Daniel Bryans, the Samoa Joes. Maybe if you look into NXT, because he's been working with those guys, the Johnny Garganos, the Tommaso Ciampas. Shawn Michaels has said several times now publicly in interviews, there's no way he can go with those guys. So I believe the audience, the fans, are going to be a lot more disappointed watching Shawn Michaels versus Daniel Bryan when you see that match. They're going to be much more disappointed in that than however disappointed they might be in the announcement of HBK versus The Undertaker. Because The Undertaker is the guy that really makes sense for Shawn Michaels because, hey, let's face it, if there's one guy that's in worse shape than Shawn Michaels, it's probably The Undertaker. But that's, okay, look, that's a negative way of looking at it. Those are just two guys that at their points in their careers right now, they could have a great match with each other without either one of them demanding too much physically from the other person.
Well,
they could work that psychological match that's not going to demand an HBK or an Undertaker taking the bumps that you'd have to take when facing a Daniel Bryan or an AJ Styles or a Samoa Joe. So personally, I think that is the match. And this is just going by what HBK has said publicly.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that's the match that he would probably end up having. And that's probably why, for the reasons he gave, just due to his age. That said, though, are they going in that direction? Or is this really, we said this last week, Chris, I don't know who's super excited about Triple H versus The Undertaker. I think when the bell rings in Australia, obviously that crowd's going to pop huge. Any crowd's going to pop huge for big names like The Undertaker and Triple H getting in the ring with each other. But just like it was with Triple H versus John Cena, who really wants to see that match? I think that tease with Shawn Michaels, I think they definitely know. Shawn Michaels said he's going to be at the pay-per-view. So we know he's going to have some kind of a role in that match. I think it was really just to borrow a current catchphrase, to go all in and to get get the fans all in on that Triple H versus Undertaker match.
There's a lot to respond there too, because I think I agree with you in the sense that they're probably going to go in that direction. I do agree with that. On the other hand, though, I think a couple of things. One,
well, in what direction? Go in the direction of
Taker and Michaels for the reasons that you've mentioned.
Okay, so you believe they're going in the direction of having that match?
Well, maybe, but I think that because of what you said that Shawn Michaels has said, and I remember hearing one interview where he alluded to something similar. So I think that because of what Shawn Michaels is saying, that it makes a lot of sense that that's his mindset going into one more match if he's going to have it. It's going to be more of the storytelling side of things versus the in-ring work, because it has been so long. So allow me to get, but I think based on what you've said, and then maybe based on what Shawn Michaels even thinks, I think a couple of things. One, I think you're overestimating The Undertaker's ability at this point. Let's not forget that his last several matches, especially at WrestleMania, have been major declines from what we were used to every year for him. I mean, he's not the same guy. And I also think that you're underestimating, and maybe Shawn Michaels is underestimating his own abilities and his style, and the ability for him to, even at his age, if he trains the way that I'm sure he would prior to a match, I think everybody's underestimating his ability to keep up with a Daniel Bryan, allowing them still to do the majority of the work, but allowing him to do some of the main things that he's always been able to do. And I don't think that Shawn Michaels, I think Shawn Michaels trusts The Undertaker completely, and I think that's still the most likely route they're going to go. But I think that Shawn Michaels would be a little more careful in the sense of understanding how much Undertaker's body has deteriorated over the years, and the fact that Shawn Michaels doesn't want to come out of retirement unless he can produce. And used to, any year, any day of the week, you could bring Shawn Michaels in, and or The Undertaker in, and he's going to tell some miraculous story at WrestleMania. The problem is the story is no longer there to be had anymore. The streak is over. So the fact that Shawn Michaels can come back and get his comeuppance on The Undertaker, Nick, that story is now gone. Right. I mean, it's not going to mean anything. Even if he won at WrestleMania, it means
there's really
very,
only
very
one story here, which is the two of them proving we're not as old as you think you are.
Yeah,
you
which
know,
they won't touch
it's can we go out there and prove to the audience that we can still do this? Which I think
again,
they can.
They can, but the Undertaker has not been selling that story, and he's still been active. And of course,
he's the dead man. He can still bury anybody and kill anybody. I mean, hell, Triple H is the guy that we should be looking at as the favorite in this entire situation. The guy's still in incredible shape.
Absolutely.
The guy went with John Cena in a very good match at the Greatest Royal Rumble. We know that guy can still go.
And I think that Triple H, and I also disagree with you in the sense, Nick, that I think they've done a phenomenal job with all the faces. I mean, I think it's bad that they can storytell as well with for this Australia event, and of course the match between Triple H and The Undertaker better than they can their own guys. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the reasons why that is here in just a little bit. But I think they've sold the shit out of this pay-per-view event. I think people are actually interested because it just feels special with all the cameos from the Stone Colds to the Steve Austins to the Mick Foleys. All the replay. They've been building this thing for a month, and we still have a couple of months to go. I mean, it's without a question. I think Mick Foley's supposed to be on Raw next week, so now they're building this up, and it is very, very, very sad, Nick, that this week here we are. And by the way, there's a couple of highlights of Raw this week. I think there were some good points, but for the most part, it was a pretty lackluster show, in my opinion. This was one of the highlights and I think it's bad that here we are in 2018, Nick, potentially talking about 2019 between Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker, and that's the biggest story coming out of Raw. And then, of course, this week you've got All In over here that's monopolizing the conversations as well. And yet, where is WWE and where is The Shield and where is Roman Reigns in those conversations? They're certainly not in positive conversations. And so I do think they've done a phenomenal job hyping this up. But here we are now, 20 years past their prime at least, and we're talking about a possible but not guaranteed matchup between Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker for next year. I think that really goes to show the state of the WWE, though, in a lot of ways.
I think it does. I think you're overshooting a little bit because, look, we are talking about Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker. One of them in HBK, arguably the greatest of all time. Undertaker certainly in that conversation as amongst the
greatest characters of all time.
And Shawn Michaels made a great point in his promo on Raw when he said, I have remained true to my word. I have not come out of retirement. If Ric Flair was coming out of retirement, we'd probably all look at that as no big deal.
He's already done it.
We saw him retire. We saw him come out of retirement, but HBK, arguably the greatest of all time, who has kept to his word and has not stepped back into a wrestling ring since he retired. To see him come back, I think that's worth a lot of talk, and I think that's worth a lot of hype, and I think that is going to usurp any modern-day superstars in the Roman Reigns and the Shields and the Seth Rollins. I think Shawn Michaels coming out there and saying, or potentially teasing a return match, you damn straight that tells everybody, hey, sorry, you're all the co-main event tonight. You're all the undercard tonight. Because if I come out here and I tease a return match, that is the main event. I think that is worthy of the buzz. And as much as I do understand your point, I think there's a lot more buzzworthiness to Shawn Michaels doing this, given the fact that we have not seen Shawn Michaels in the ring, and he has been that true to his word. And if you're building this thing for 2019, I mean, hell, who knows when this match could happen? Is it going to happen at WrestleMania next year? If you do, that is a long ways away. Still, you've still got many months before WrestleMania 35. Imagine how much they can hype this match. People will be so excited to see this return match. I don't see how it can't be bigger than anything WWE is doing right now. And it shouldn't be. It should be bigger than anything.
I do not disagree. I think, though, that it does the storytelling, just with that one promo that they were allowed to cut and the stuff they're allowed to do, and the stuff that WWE puts out there for guys like Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker, I think that's more of a testament to to what they don't think about the rest of their show, because they're really good at highlighting these one-off, doesn't really do much for the rest of the guys, types of stories and matches. And so look, kudos to them. Kudos to The Undertaker, and who you knew would be fine if Shawn Michaels ever did decide to come out of retirement. And kudos to Shawn Michaels for respecting The Undertaker so much that he's probably wrestled, no pun intended again, with this for a while. And if he's got this itch, it's not about the money, I would imagine, for Shawn Michaels, even though he brought it up in the promo. I'm sure that definitely helps. I mean, he's probably doing pretty well for himself, but couple $1 million payday is probably going to still help him out a lot and motivate him somewhat. So I'm really interested to where this is going to go, and I think it's going to be great. And I definitely agree with you as far as the original question of what did this mean. I certainly do not think that it was improv either. I think that it was definitely planned to some degree to put the feeler out there. They can always go back on it if they ever needed to. But I think in the end, I think that Shawn Michaels does come out of retirement at this point, and it's gotten me extremely excited. As you know, Nick, Shawn Michaels is without a question my favorite of all time.
And I'll tell you what, you should be excited, because here we are on this show right now. We are discussing the potential of Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker. We're not talking about The Undertaker versus Triple H, the pay-per-view.
No, I know.
You haven't said who you think's going to win. I haven't said who I think's going to win. I quite frankly don't care.
I don't either.
To me, they didn't do much in that segment last night. They did a hell of a lot in that segment last night.
No, they did.
But they didn't do very much in that segment to make me want to see Triple H versus The Undertaker much more than I already
do or don't.
Right. Whatever my level of excitement was pretty much stayed the same. It hasn't changed, yeah. What it made me want to do is get on the horn on this show and talk about the potential return of HBK.
Yep.
And it made me want to look forward to a potential return match for him. So, they're walking on a very, very fine tightrope here if they threw that out there on Raw this week for no payoff.
I agree. And as we get closer to the reality of this, if it does happen, in fact, I think we will have to start debating a little bit more on who it should be, because I'm with you, Nick. I think a retirement match, look, The Undertaker was going to keep going, and Shawn Michaels wanting to retire and hang up the boots officially, it made sense storyline-wise for The Undertaker to go over on him twice in a row at WrestleMania, and then to keep going until he ultimately put over Brock Lesnar, who I still think was a good guy to beat the streak, who then goes over and puts, and goes on and puts over Roman Reigns. That's the cycle of the wrestling business, as it should be. We have very little to gain at this point, Nick, from Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. So, I mean, I want to shelf this, though. I really do. I want to shelf this, and I want to talk about it. If we do get a little closer, we'll talk more. We'll hear what Shawn Michaels has to say a little more candidly over this next week. We can talk about this coming up and the possibilities of who that should be. They really set it up for The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels in that promo, and it was great. But I really hope, if that's the case, and that's the way they go, that's not the only match Shawn Michaels comes back for. And I know that it could be very tainted if they do more than one. So I'm very, very hesitant to say that he could go on more than just one match. I think it's one big WrestleMania match. But don't keep in mind, when Shawn Michaels comes out of retirement, if he does well against an Undertaker at WrestleMania, there's no reason Shawn Michaels couldn't be a Rock type if he can stay in relatively decent shape and come back and still work, maybe at a SummerSlam or a WrestleMania and have a couple of more matches in him. I don't know if that's the direction he wants to go in, because I know how serious he takes the retirement to begin with. But we do need to discuss this, because I don't see any benefit to WWE for Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker, both of which who are about to be retired. Although The Undertaker may never retire. He may be dead, and literally dead, and still wrestling at WrestleMania 15 years from now. Who knows? But I will
ghost returning to Raw on Labor Day. That is the definition of labor.
So I think that we do need to, we will have to obviously discuss that.
I will just say this, though. I'll throw this out there, that keep in mind that, when is this match going to take place if it does? It's not going to happen at, Backlash. It's going to happen at WrestleMania.
Of course.
And remember that WrestleMania is always that wild card pay-per-view where WWE is interested in the buy rate, the number, the attendance figure for that particular show.
For that one
Not
deal.
necessarily what's going to happen a month after or 2 months after. They want the buys and the attendance figures for that show. An Undertaker versus HBK match is hell of a nostalgia bout, and that is going to pack people into the stadium. So remember that when you think about, we've done this before, Chris, we get hung up going into WrestleMania on that idea of, well, what is the future plan here if they're going to have this match at WrestleMania? I don't think WWE looks at it like that. WrestleMania is it's a one-off special extravaganza where those kinds of matches can happen just for nostalgia factor and not necessarily for the future, to decide the future of the company.
I 100% agree with you that is the way they look at it, and I 100% disagree that that's the way they should look at it.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, so
that's another conversation.
Because Shawn Michaels versus AJ Styles still gets the pop that you want, but it also puts over AJ Styles in such a big way. So we'll debate that going forward, obviously, if this becomes more of a reality. But that's the main event here on The Voice of Wrestling. And we're back here at The Voice of Wrestling. Chris Cash, Nick Paglino on voiceofwrestling.net, ProWrestling.com, and Fight TV, which, speaking of, we might as well jump into kind of our second main event of this week because it was such a huge talking point. And then, of course, after this, we will talk about some other things in WWE, from new tag team champions, the fact that we have now 2 legitimate factions, at least. I mean, main event factions in WWE between the Shield and, of course, Dolph and McEntire and Braun. Kevin Owens has returned. He quit and then came back. So we'll talk about that. And but all in, Nick, I mean, we're not going to really run down the card and the matches and break it all down. From top to bottom, it was really, 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 really good. It was just a good all-around pay-per-view and event. Now, you can specify on a couple of things in there if you want to. I think for all intents and purposes, what I think most fans now are coming out of this weekend thinking, because now it's in the past. It's what's going to happen going forward, Nick. That is the question. Sure. Cody and them in the ring after the event, of course, and even since they've already teased, they've already discussed, they've already pretty much all but guaranteed and confirmed that that's not the end of what they're going to do. That's the beginning. So we know that much. But what does this transition into, Nick? I know what I would love for it to be, and I know what it could be, and I know what I think that it should be. But I don't know that they're necessarily thinking that, because I do remember prior to this, they were already making statements that All In was really just the first of many. But I think they're probably kind of looking at the same structure. Will they take the success from this event and change their plans accordingly? Sure, that's a possibility. But as of now, I don't know that they want to run before they truly walk. I think they really want to kind of get up to speed with how to run and maintain this business, because keep in mind, as far as I know, Nick, and you tell me if I'm wrong, you've got Nick, Matt, and Cody, at the top of this food chain here, right? There's not any other major investors or partners at this point. It's the 3 of them, and they documented this entire process, which kudos to them. Great marketing, by the way. It is a truly remarkable thing that they did. But Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, these guys are just learning the business side of it as well. So I don't think they want to necessarily run out there, and they've played it smart so far. And the worst thing they could do is bite off more than they can necessarily chew. Let's run another successful mega event, a little bit bigger, a little bit more mainstream. And if that one goes well, then let's go to the third. And then if that goes well, let's transition maybe into something a little bit more resembling of a traditional company, if that's what they decide to do. But I don't think that it's going to be more than what I just laid out and described. But maybe you feel differently.
No, I don't. And one of the main reasons why is because we can't forget that these are all talents that are still under contract.
Good point.
to Ring of Honor
Yeah.
and New Japan. And so,
they were given permission to do this. I mean,
you're getting permission. And certainly from a business standpoint, it makes sense for Ring of Honor to come in and say, all right, yeah, absolutely do it. And if we give you your blessing, our blessing, then, we're also going to get a little dime in return, so certainly it benefits everybody. But when you start talking about the future of All In, the question really becomes, under what umbrella? Is it under the Ring of Honor umbrella? Is it under the New Japan umbrella? Do they go to WWE? And do they pitch to WWE? Hey, we've got All In. We have this product. Do you want us to bring it to WWE? Or do they do it on their own? And right now, I think one of the biggest questions that everybody has is, where are these guys going to end up? And to me, I completely agree with you when you say that, look, they just did this one, and as successful as it was and as great as it was, because I did think it was a great event too. And a little something that I want to throw in there for all of the fans out there who criticize WWE so much for being a sports entertainment company. Correct me if I'm wrong, but did we not see giant druid dicks coming down the entrance ramp at All In?
Yes, but hold on real quick, though. I will say this. I mean, yes, they get criticized for being a sports entertainment, but I think they get criticized more than just being a sports entertainment thing. They get criticized for being a bad sports entertainment
There you
deal.
go. That was going to be my point.
Yeah.
I think it was interesting because I think a lot of fans going into All In really expected this to be a wall-to-wall straight wrestling show.
Right.
But there was a ton of sports entertainment in this show. I never thought that we would be sitting here in 2018 doing a broadcast like this, me asking you like, hey, Chris, which one was your favorite druid dick?
Right.
That came down. Like, I loved the one in the front, because it was the closest to my face. And, I love my druid dicks like right here. You know what I mean? It's like, we're talking about druid dicks here on VOW. And this is not coming from WWE. This is coming from All In, but it was hilarious. It was done well. So this also goes to that idea of everybody who criticizes WWE for being PG. Oh, they got to go back to the Attitude Era. No, you can be PG. You can be sports entertainment. You just have to do it well. And this was a great example of a company saying, we will show you how to do great wrestling. We'll show you how to do great sports entertainment. So it created that overall enjoyable event from a wrestling standpoint and from an entertainment standpoint. So yes, I agree with you that it was a great event, but it was the first of its kind. So it had all of this momentum because it was the first of its kind. What was it going to be? What kind of event was it going to be? What was the ring going to look like? What was the entrance ramp going to look like? What were we going to see as the main event? Nick Aldis, we haven't seen him in a while. What was he going to look like in the ring? Main eventing for the title in a big title match, arguably the biggest match of his career against Cody Rhodes. There were a lot of what ifs that I think a lot of people tuned in just to get the answers to those questions. Now that we know, and now that we saw it, you can't do All In 2 next month and then All In 3 the month after that and All In 4 the month after that. This has to be a very special thing, I believe, that you do almost like a WrestleMania, And so for me, it makes the most sense, I believe, for everybody involved to remain with who they are with.
Yes.
The Ring of Honors, the New Japans, because we saw that those guys, those companies allowed them to make the show they wanted to make. They said, hey, go do it. Go do the show you want to make. I want to say something right now. I want to make something very clear. This is my opinion. Chris, you can tell me if you agree or disagree. If Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega and Marty Scurll and Hangman Page and the guys that said they were going to make this collective decision themselves as to where they go, they were going to move as a group. If they go to WWE at the end of this year or in January, February next year, 2019, it will be strictly because of money. That's it. Because WWE is not going to give them that creative freedom that an ROH and that a New Japan is going to give them. Cody Rhodes said a while ago when he left WWE, he left because he wanted to make his own music. And WWE is not going to allow you to make your own music. Or they will to a certain extent. You know, I could see WWE signing Cody Rhodes saying, okay, we're going to take you and the Bucks and Omega, and we're going to let you be your elite thing that you're doing. But it's, you know, in 6-7 months, we're going to water all that down. Look what they're doing with the broken Matt Hardy thing. You know, they took the broken universe. They took that Matt Hardy gimmick, but what did they do with it? They put their own WWE spin on it. People were marginally disappointed with it. And, you know, this is what we're left with now, you know? So even if WWE takes them as who they are now, it'll probably be a very bastardized version of it. So if they go to that company, it will be strictly because of money. And I want to also make sure that I stress that that's not a criticism if they do. You know, people have needs, you know. James Storm ended up re-signing with TNA instead of NXT because at the end of the day, TNA made him a better money offer. He had children they had to provide for. You know, whatever your needs are, people's needs change in the wrestling business. You know, if you're a single guy and you're in your 20s, you may be wrestling for different reasons than if you're a guy who's pushing 40 or in his 40s and married and has children. You have just different needs. You know, you got to put food on the table for kids. So if someone decides for themselves, hey, you know what? I'm taking the money. I cannot blame them for that because they've probably decided that that's what's best for them and what they need. So I don't want anybody to think that me saying them going to WWE for the money is a criticism. It's just, that's the fact. If they go to WWE, they're doing it for the money. Do you see it any other way?
No, and I'm with you. I don't think that it's necessarily a criticism. I think that they would be naive and downright stupid almost to go there with any other expectations
he knows the ropes.
I mean, Cody understands what's happened with WCW. I think that if TNA ever were to sell, I mean, don't expect any kind of crazy crossover there. It's just for the library, most likely. It's I mean, this is another situation where I think what Cody and them have established, and I think they have to protect this because keep in mind, you keep bringing up the Ring of Honors and the New Japans, and while I agree with you right now, they probably financially need, and some of the documentary stuff that was coming up was between Cody and Brandy talking about, look, we were a little scared of what was going to happen next for us, and so I think, look, these are all guys that need the money. I mean, it's not as if the money could not be a motivating factor. And I would be surprised somewhat, or I wouldn't be surprised if Vince McMahon tries to get ahead of this thing before it blows up to a point where it becomes more expensive down the road. The only way I think this is more than every several months, kind of a house of hardcore, but on a much grander stage, because these guys know how to market. I mean, that's the one thing that WWE does not do a great job of, but they don't need it as much because they still are number one. They are the monopoly of pro wrestling. But what these guys understand is how to really give kind of that little engine that could ground, underground, cult-like type of following and storyline that grows and grows and grows. And what's great about that is it can truly help you accomplish a lot in business. I mean, it really can. And I think that that's what's kind of pushed this because it was the first time that some pretty known guys, especially in the Cody deal, and knew what he was doing. I think, and just the timing of it all was great, but really went off and tried to do something like this kind of on their own in again, a very grassroots underground type of way. And I think that the only concern with that is you only really get that story once. They just sold out 10,000 people.
Right.
Now the expectations have gone that much higher. So they can't duplicate that too early. I think they have to get their ducks in a row.
The new car smell is going to wear off at some
100%. And I think what's going to end up happening here is the only way that most likely, and again, they have to be very smart about this because the more cult-like and underground and grassroots that they can make the entire growth of whatever this might become, the better. Because You do not need traditional media, traditional distribution. You don't need that traditional marketing. You don't need any of that anymore. Facebook Watch is becoming the next Netflix. Netflix is the current Netflix. And you've got YouTube. But Facebook is now trying to get into that market. And in a couple of years, I'm banking on Facebook. So if Facebook Watch can have weekly episodic series that are literally right now only being allowed to so many type of content creators. VLW can't even be a part of Facebook Watch right this minute because of the guidelines that they have. But Facebook Watch literally is going to give up 55 to 60% of their revenue to the content creators. So if that's the case, I mean, that's money. And the fact that you've got now just literally everyday schmucks, people like me, people like Nick, that can start a series online and it go viral and literally reach on a week-to-week basis the same amount of people that WWE Raw is doing, whether it's on a video on demand or a live deal. But let's not forget, Joe Rogan can literally have tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands tuning in live every time he goes on for 3 to 3.5 hours and talk to somebody. Let's not underestimate that people's attention span, at least as it relates to the internet, as a distribution channel, is growing. It's not where TV is, but it is getting there. And it will replace, for all intents and purposes, TV at some point. They can keep this underground, Nick. They can do, and they've already proven that they can do it. They can get the buzz. They can get the viral, that viral or the virality, if you want to call it as such, on their own. They do not need to sell out anytime soon unless they have to financially. And so to answer your question, yes, I agree with you. But I will hope happens is that I urge them to please, they've created something that very few people can do. This day and age, at least in pro wrestling. Not that I don't think there's other people capable, but just most people will not literally take the chance. Sure. You know, the risk of failure is too big to try it. So they've done something, and I hope for their sakes and for everybody's sakes that they don't sell out to a WWE, to a Ring of Honor, to a New Japan, to a Sinclair type of broadcast group. Anybody that offers them TV that's literally yesterday. Like tomorrow is what they're doing right now, selling out a 10,000 seat arena by nothing but social media and word of mouth and some pretty damn creative marketing. That's all it is. And it really goes to show you what you can do.
But I think in the meantime, though, they've got to keep working.
Sure.
They've got to keep their name out there. So to me, re-signing with a Ring of Honor or a New Japan, or of course, both, because they have that working relationship, that makes the most sense to me, because in the meantime, you have to keep your product. Cody Rhodes has to keep his product out there and visible in front of people. And I think Ring of Honor is the least damaging to that product. The Young Bucks, Cody Rhodes, Kenny Omega, they can be who they want to be in Ring of Honor and in New Japan. Cody Rhodes goes back to WWE. You never know. In a year, he could be back to being Stardust. And now if he's Stardust again, you know how difficult it's going to be for him to have to shed that skin a second time to go back to creating the groundswell. I think the groundswell, like we said, it's good for, when should All In 2 take place? In a year?
Well, no, I don't think it'll take that. I mean, that's way too long. I think.
Okay, in 6 months?
3 to 6, yeah.
So what do they do between now and, all right?
So look, I'm not disagreeing that they don't re-sign with and keep their name recognition out there. The problem, though, is Ring of Honor and Sinclair. Keep in mind, these are conservative people at the top of Sinclair. These are very conservative. They're business people. They're not going to allow it to get too big, too fast, too successful without wanting to stake their claim. And as long as Cody and them, this is my, and it also depends on what their goals are. I don't really know what they want to do with this long term. I don't know if they're just talking about one-off events every year. I mean, yes, it could just be an annual thing. It could be the WrestleMania, the WrestleMania. I mean, for the independents, it could be that.
Sure.
I mean, they could absolutely do once a year and be done with it, Nick. That might be all they want to do and just keep getting better and try to get to 30,000 next year and then 50,000 and then just call it a day every year. Keep hyping it up because that would become a spectacle. I don't know that that's their ambition. They're young guys. I would imagine they want to keep riding this train and see where it takes them. So yes, even though I agree they need to do that in the meantime, all I would suggest at that point is get it in writing, which I'm sure they're already going to do. They're smart enough guys. I think that at this point, they just make sure they have the clauses in there that give them the freedom to carry this through until it becomes a legitimate conflict of interest that they can then finally walk away altogether financially if that's what they decide to do. And not even so much just the finances, Nick. I agree that staying involved in the New Japans and the Ring of Honors of the world, WWE is an exception, by the way. Yes, it's the most maybe exposure you can get, but it's also the most strict, and you're not going to get what you want out of it. So sure. I feel like, with the exception of them, Impact kind of whatever, even though I don't think you get a lot of exposure there either. But I think just as long as you've got the creativity and the freedom to do what you want to do, as it relates to All In, and you're not giving up stake, giving up claim, giving up equity, then yeah, without a question, you keep doing that, and then you start focusing behind the scenes on everything else. And keep in mind, Cody Rhodes just won the NWA Championship.
There you go. I mean, so he's got to have a title defense.
He's clearly going to be doing some outside work. I mean, so yeah, I think. But hey, congratulations to Cody, the Young
100%.
Bucks. The entire crew and all the wrestlers. Hey, Billy Gunn and his son Austin were there in the Rumble. Had some amazing spots. I mean, really had a lot of fun. It looked like I was.
Big congratulations too to Conrad Thompson and everybody that put together StarCast because
StarCast
by all
great.
accounts that was an absolutely incredible weekend of events that they put together. That was really described to me. We had a couple of guys, Mike Killam, Doug Enriquez, the crew over at ProWrestling.com. They were there and really describing it to me as nothing like any other. It wasn't a convention, it was just a full weekend of entertainment, with a roast of Bruce Pritchard and, Marty Scurll and Joey Janela doing karaoke, and Jeff Jarrett hosting a total nonstop Jarrett panel, just a lot of really amazing events. So kudos to those guys as well.
Well, and Fight TV for broadcasting. Again, distribution is different these days, as we can attest to by how many people we reach every Wednesday on Fight TV. It is remarkable what is capable as long as you kind of keep your eye on the prize and grow as it grows. But I think, look, nobody wanted to see Cody and Matt and Nick fail. Nobody, besides maybe a Vince McMahon or people that hold grudges. I'm not saying Vince does. I'm just saying Vince McMahon might have wanted him to fail, and then other people that just don't like the guys.
You know what? I bet he really didn't.
I'm sure he didn't.
Because there's so many people too that I think another facet of this conversation is that, people keep saying it's like, well, are you building this thing so you can one day, take over WWE or put WWE out of business? I think a lot of wrestling fans still have that Monday Night Wars
of course they do.
mentality in their mind when it really truly was two companies that were fighting for the same space on Monday night, and one was trying to put the other one out of business. That people have to get that out of their heads. This isn't like the Wild West where, there's only room for one of us in town. There's plenty of room for everybody in town. WWE can be its own thing and be successful in its own right, and Ring of Honor and New Japan and All In. If someday down the line we have an All In promotion, that can become successful with the other companies being successful as well. It does not mean that one has to go out of business or one has to defeat the other. So I think that's a mentality that people have to start ridding themselves of.
But I also don't think, though, that it's out of the realm of possibility for true competition, not tomorrow, not next year, but because the landscape, and depending on how well, WWE has all the money and all the resources, but they also have Vince McMahon at the top. That can be a major hindrance 5 years from now if he doesn't do what he's supposed to. If he doesn't do what he's supposed to keep up with technology, the pulse of today's kids. If he doesn't, and I think it's already showing a little bit. I mean, his age has certainly showed. He's got, again, Triple H. The problem with that, though, is Triple H is not an outsider, and he's not a marketer. He's not an internet guy. He's not that guy. He's a wrestler that has gone up into that. And I think that's sometimes a hindrance in and of itself, even though he's done a phenomenal job with NXT. The difference between the two companies, between NXT and what WWE puts out on Raw and SmackDown, we've talked about 100 different times, Nick. The fact that NXT is really the better show, the better, it really is the better fans, and yet they can't find a way to transition the cult-like feeling that you get as a fan of NXT all the way up to the mainstream, roster and shows. And so there's a lot of things. But I think you're right. I think it's too premature at this point to worry, and for Cody or for the fans, for Cody, Matt, Nick, or for the fans to be thinking about competition with WWE. But I do think the sky is absolutely the limit, and I think that this weekend has proven that there is room. All it takes is some creativity, a little guts, and money, maybe a little money. But I think if they have another successful event or two, the money will start being there. There will be people coming to try to ride the gravy train.
Absolutely.
So I think the money will be there too, and I think the sky is absolutely the limit, depending on their ambitions. But congratulations once again, and can't wait to cover the next one. Nick, before we get out of here, a couple of other things though, and a great segue too is just the fact that I feel like one of WWE's issues. You see what they did with All In and how amazing it was, but one of the issues that I feel WWE has is rushing things. So first, let's start with the idea of Kevin Owens. We talked about last week. Man, they set it up perfectly with him quitting, giving him the ability, Nick, possibly to go and actually do some stuff that makes him get over, like the vignettes outside of the ring, behind the scenes, giving him camera time in that regard. Why couldn't an interviewer, Charlie or Renee or whoever the case may be, gone to his house to talk to him about quitting? One day, appropriately on Labor Day, would have made a lot. One freaking week you couldn't give it to play the bit up. For some reason, they felt a stupid segment between Bobby Lashley and Constable. Like, where do you get this crap, by the way, Nick? Normally, I knew you were going to have an issue with the police thing. I knew for a fact you were going to have an issue with that police thing. As soon as I saw it, I'm thinking, Nick is going to talk about the logic of wrestling again. And here we go, because normally I tune you out during those conversations because it's pro freaking wrrestling. But
hey, I didn't go there. I said
you were
celebrated Labor Day
sarcastically
in the best way they could. They all went to work.
Sarcastically saying whatever you were going to say. But either way, I think, look, besides that fact, you get a stupid Constable Corbin gives Bobby Lashley like an official letter, like a letter backstage.
Right.
That then Charlie is reading, and he's mouthing the entire thing, which was just awkward to me. That is like this official.
Right. It's like, was this trying to tell us that like Bobby Lashley doesn't know how to read?
Like something.
And
I
like
guess. Charlie
had to read it for him.
It was weird, but it was an official document to say he needs to go to some sort of like anger management thing with Jinder Mahal. And where do they get this shit? Like, that's logic flaws there. That's logic gaps and lapses right there for you.
But you know what, though, Chris? To me, and I don't even want to. I wasn't even going to go there with the logic issue because, yeah, I understand it's pro wrestling. To me, it's the predictability factor. And honestly,
it's hard to predict that, Nick. I mean, I can't predict that stupid.
No, I'm not going to predict that. What I'm talking about is, okay, when you see the Shield getting arrested at the beginning of Raw, Mike Rome is on Twitter saying, update, the Shield is being processed by the police department. Do you not know they're coming back at the end of the show?
Nick,
it's the most predictable thing in the world. Forget about the logic of getting out of jail in an hour.
No, not getting out of jail, Nick. They saw a judge on a Monday night. And
they called, Judge Judy must have been there.
Come on.
Ready to go on Labor Day, filming her show.
On Labor Day. They got
on Labor Day.
They got a government.
I mean, can you imagine that they like take the Shield out to the beach and say like, here's the judge. He's laying out. He's drinking a freaking salted margarita.
Right.
Let him go.
Yeah, that was bad.
Okay. But forget about the logic.
Yes.
You just knew, because they've done this so many times before, when the beginning segment sees the babyface getting kicked out of the arena, he's coming back at the end.
Yes.
Okay, so predictability. Bobby Lashley going into the ring, and let me tell you this. Here's why, honestly, at the end of the day, some of the bigger storyline events that happened on Raw last night didn't bother me as much, because at the end of the day, they ended up not being as predictable as I thought they would be. What did everyone think was going to happen in the Lashley segment? I thought he was just going to kick Jinder Mahal's ass after doing the Chauncey thing. Well, hey, they went in another direction.
Yeah.
Kevin Owens, surprise attacks Bobby Lashley. That whole segment ended up having nothing to do with Jinder Mahal. He was sort of the red herring for Kevin Owens' return.
Yes.
And then even flashing forward to the main event, when the Shield finally came back, they did not get their comeuppance. And for 2 weeks in a row now, we've seen the baby faces getting dominated by the heels. And WWE never wants to put too much heat on their heels and make their baby faces look weak, because we can't do that. They've got to always look like superheroes. I was quite pleasantly surprised by the finish of Raw last night, and them really just going really all in again on putting that heat into this new heel faction group. And I liked the swerve of Kevin Owens, even though, yes, I understand your point, which is, you couldn't delay that for a couple of weeks.
Well, that's the problem.
And you know what? Look, these are two different subjects too. As far as Kevin Owens, you want to take that as a starting point here. I don't know that I like this. I love the return. And I love the sort of distraction. I love the attack. I love the viciousness of Kevin Owens. But Kevin Owens and Bobby Lashley are two guys that are in desperate need of a win, of a push, of something
one of them's
big.
Coming on the short
I don't know if pairing them up together right now is the way to go about that.
I agree. They're both. One of them's coming up with the short end of the stick, and I think it probably ends up being. No, it probably ends up being Bobby Lashley. I was going to say Kevin Owens.
Really?
I think so, because look. I hate it for Bobby, but Nick, I don't think they have a clue what to do with him. Every week, It's just one thing after the next, and it's all bad. I mean, he's not getting the reaction. It's all bad. It's just bad writing for Bobby Lashley. I think that's the problem. When you can see how well, look. Let me give you the difference real quick, and this will sum up pretty much everything that I say that I feel about Kevin Owens this week coming back. And by the way, I almost think that they listen to our show, Nick. I really do, because there's times where I feel like when we talk about stuff like factions, needing factions, they ultimately come back with that. Look, I've told them, please don't let my Dolphin, my boy Dolphin and Drew McEntire, don't turn them too early. Give them something here. So not only do they create a faction out of it, but they give them the tag team titles. But I feel like all of this is still ultimately in an effort, Nick, and the fact that you just mentioned that they got the beatdown, the Shield got the beatdown twice in a row, 2 weeks in a row. This is all still just a ruse, a ploy to get the Shield over, specifically one guy, though, in Roman as a babyface. Everything else does not matter. That's why I think that, by the way, which I'm not a big fan of the B team. I thought that was rushed. I didn't like it at all. It didn't make a lot of sense to put the titles on them. And then, of course, the tag team division as a whole, Nick, it has been just absolutely abysmal. So I didn't like that to begin with. But now, after 1 week of determining that these guys apparently are a faction, they throw it out there, Nick, that Dolph and Drew McEntire are going to beat up the Revival, who had the championship match, and go out there and beat the only tag team that they had with any momentum at all. You literally saw the pairing of Chad Gable and shit.
Bobby Roode. Well,
Bobby Roode.
Yeah, but Chris, it looks to me like they're just hitting a complete reset button on the tag team division.
They are.
Hardy and Wyatt are gone.
Now you see AOP with Drake Maverick. I mean, all of this feels.
Yeah, I mean, look at what they did in 24 hours. You've got AOP that is, I mean, obviously they were there, but they're instantly almost a more credible threat because you got I think they got a very good mouthpiece in Drake Maverick.
Sure.
I think that guy's really great on the stick.
He's good.
They got a really dominating win last night, so they're clearly they're in line for a big push.
Okay, don't call it dominating.
They're definitely going to get behind that because those are two guys they just don't know what to do with, so they're probably going to get behind them as a team. And you got new tag team champions literally in a 24-hour period of time. You've got a brand new tag division all of a sudden.
No, you do. But again, let's not look at that necessarily. Let's not give WWE a lot of freaking credit for this. That's the problem.
Well, you had okay, no, listen, I'm not trying to pat them too much on the back. You had Dolph Ziggler and Drew McIntyre were already a tag team. AOP were already a tag team that actually debuted on the main roster and then disappeared and weren't doing anything, and now all of a sudden they're getting that push. No, I understand. I think it's almost like someone, just said, hey, it's like there's this creative guy who's in charge of the tag team division, and he's been like locked in some room for a really long time, and he finally got his way out. And was like, hey guys, remember me?
I'm here.
And he's like the guy from Office Space, that's like, I gotta set the building on fire. It's like nobody ever listens to this guy.
Right.
And finally he set WWE's offices on fire and said, let's do something with the tag team division.
I agree. Yeah. And I think that it was that's the problem. Everything in WWE is so rushed, fly by the seat of the pants, react instead of create. I mean, it's like let's. And a perfect example is, again, I keep putting this guy over like $1 million, and also SmackDown does a better job of this. They tell real stories over there. AJ Styles and Samoa Joe feels like it's just getting started, Nick, and that's because it is, and it deserves that type of airspace. And then also on top of that, on the Raw side, you've got someone like Elias who is over like $1 million freaking dollars. Why? Because we've gotten used to him now. Because they've done just enough every single week to position him in ways that suit him and ways that he can do what he does best, which is badly play the guitar, get people over, or get over as a babyface right before he insults the town and gets them booing again. Alexa Bliss got to play a part in that bit this week. And again, Alexa Bliss, phenomenal. They're now trying to say, look, we don't want Alexa Bliss and Ronda Rousey to be over just yet, so let's find ways to finally get them. And again, they're doing a decent job, at least with the Alexas of the world, the Eliases of the world, the Samoa Joe versus AJ Styles of the world. Why? Because they slowed down and let it breathe. And here we are just earlier talking about the attention spans of people in general, but wrestling fans specifically. Look, our attention spans are longer if shit's good. Period, the end. And if you don't give things time to breathe, like you did with the examples that I just mentioned, and you don't allow people like Dolph Ziggler, Drew McIntyre, if they're all over the place. I mean, look, the Intercontinental title was the big part of it. And Nick, you and I discussed at that point whether or not maybe they would end up doing the tag team titles next. It looked like they completely went against those plans. Like it really did. And now Braun's a part of that. If they hadn't decided to team Braun up with these guys, which I bet you would have decided literally the day before Raw last week, then what would have happened to Dolph Ziggler and Drew McIntyre? Like honestly, I feel like everything right now is being shaped and molded around Roman Reigns, which again, I understand to some degree. But God, this all could be so much easier in my mind. And I feel like they are taking the long way around this whole program with Roman Reigns as opposed to finding the shortcut. And you know what the shortcut was, Nick, right? Turning him heel. Turn the damn son of a bitch
they do that
heel.
all the time. That's their that's the MO in WWE. They will turn people heel. They do it
but Roman
in
needed
two circumstances.
Roman needed it though.
They'll turn a guy heel like a Braun Strowman in order to get a baby face over that they're just relentlessly pushing, or they'll turn someone heel or they'll turn them face if they just have no idea what to do with them.
Yeah.
If they don't know how to book them. It's like, okay, they've done it to Sheamus 50 million times.
That's true.
We don't know what to do with Sheamus, so let's just turn him heel or let's turn him babyface. And that never works. And we talked about this last week. What is the collateral damage that could be done to the rest of the roster in turning Braun Strowman heel. I still believe it's a bit premature to say, to give an answer to that question, because, you know, it didn't seem to me like on Raw this week. Did it feel to you like they were trending in the direction more of the audience and the live crowd warming up to the Shield and Roman Reigns and getting a bit more on board with booing Braun Strowman? They certainly were booing the group at the end of Raw.
No. I think they've done a decent job of it. I feel like though that again, this is just a long way around. I think Roman Reigns turning heel was the obvious choice. And I think that again, all of this is being. I think that's the issue with Vince McMahon that I have at this point in his career and his age, or whatever you want to call, like whatever you want to blame it on. But I feel like he is so stubborn.
Like I said, it has to be hard-headedness. I mean, yes. I don't understand why you couldn't just, there are ways you can go about this, Well,
but look, there's a lot of ways.
And again, listen, I understand, the only other way you can look at this, we've talked about this before, is from the standpoint of the investors and the people in WWE who are looking for a face of the company. Roman Reigns is, if you look at Roman Reigns, he is that guy. He has the John Cena charisma. He has the Rock, the Stone Cold. He has that charisma and that look to be the guy that wears the title with the suit and goes on the Today Show and does the promotional work. The Miz is really good at that because he has a great promotional face. Sure. He has a good face of the company.
And he can talk
look.
Well. Yeah.
It's hard for Braun Strowman. You're going to throw a suit and a tie on Braun Strowman and have this guy go out there on the Today Show and be the face of your company. It's difficult.
That's true.
You have women, though. You have many other options.
You do.
You have the Ronda Rouseys and the Charlotte Flairs who can go out there and be the face of the company.
Yep.
Like I said, the only thing I can think of is if they're in a desperate situation to have a male and a female representative of the company, they feel like it has to be Roman Reigns. My argument has always been, though, he can be an on-screen villain and still be the face of the company.
He can be.
When you're watching a popular television show, when you're watching if you met the guy who plays, the lead White Walker in Game of Thrones, you're not going to see him come onto a set of the Today Show and say, "Oh my God, I'm scared of this guy." He's an actor. You can look at Stephanie McMahon. Stephanie McMahon is one of the faces of WWE. She does more appearances and more TV show appearances, and she plays an on-screen villain.
Yep.
People know how to separate the difference. Roman Reigns can be a heel. Your face of the company does not have to be a baby face on television. I don't understand why WWE believes that needs to be true.
I agree with you, and I think also one good thing, the heels look great on Raw this week, just so you know. I really did. I thought that was great. And
the segment was great. I thought the segment was great.
I thought it was good, and I think look, it was rushed. I think Dolph and Drew as tag team champions make sense. They want credibility behind that faction to counter the Shield. I think because it's all been so rushed, I think it's all been to kind of placate Roman Reigns and really appease him and his reactions. I think fans are really resenting why we are here. If it would have happened organically, it would have been accepted better. But overall, those were the highlights of Raw this week, and there was very few. Alexa, I thought was really good. I think the Shield, and I thought the Shield segments, despite the logic issues, but the Shield, segments, and of course what's going on with Braun and Drew and Dolph, that was all really, really well done. And then of course Shawn Michaels and the Undertaker and virtually everything else. Kevin Owens, I really think that's going to hurt him in the end. I mean, give him the opportunity to breathe a little bit with what he does best. He quits 1 week. We really make no reference other than he just shows up and attacks. It's like, good God, did you forget what you just wrote for the guy last week? Like, really? So anyway, a lot of things going right for WWE, but many things going wrong as well, all being overshadowed this week without a question by All In, and kudos to all of the guys involved there. So awesome week, though. And guys, we've got plenty coming up, though, in the next few weeks as we get ready for Australia, as we get ready for Evolution.
We got Hell in a Cell coming
Hell
up
in a
in just a
Cell
couple of
coming-
weeks, so
yeah.
we'll preview that, which is, I think, shaping up to be a good card, and we can see some great stuff coming out of that. So, a lot to talk about in the coming months.
So, guys, please make sure you check out ProWrestling.com, Fight.tv, who did a great job running all the All-In and StarCast events over the weekend. Then, of course, VoiceOfWrestling.net. That's Nick Paglino. I'm Chris Cash. This has been the Voice of Wrestling. We'll see you next week.